The Grand Assembly Hall had stood on the world of Vareth Prime for 12,000 years. It was a building made of crystalline light, so large that clouds sometimes formed near its ceiling. Inside, representatives from over 400 alien species sat on floating platforms, each one speaking for billions of their kind. They had gathered here for countless generations to make laws, settle disputes, and decide the fate of worlds. Humanity had been part of this council for only 37 years. In galactic terms, this was nothing. A single breath, a moment so brief that most species had barely learned to pronounce human names. Ambassador. Catherine Holt stood on the human platform, positioned in the outer ring where new species were placed. She was a woman of 53 years with gray hair and tired eyes. She had spent her entire career trying to make the galaxy see humanity as worthy of respect. Today, she was beginning to think she had wasted her life. High Counselor Drethon rose from the central pillar. He was a serpent-like creature covered in scales that glowed with different colors depending on his mood. Right now, they glowed with the cold blue of official business. The Dominion of Veth has presented its claim, he announced, his voice carried by machines to every ear in the chamber. The human colony on Kepler 442b sits on land that belongs to the Veth. The Council has voted. Humanity must remove all 12,000 colonists within one standard cycle. Catherine felt her hands shake. She pressed them flat against her legs to hide it. High Counselor, she said, keeping her voice steady, that colony has existed for 19 years. Children have been born there. It is their home. The law is clear, Drethon replied. The Veth surveyed that system 300 years before humans arrived. Their claim is older. They surveyed it with a drone, Catherine said. A single drone that passed through and never stopped. They never built anything. Never lived there. Never even named the planets. From another platform, Ambassador Kethrel of the Veth rose on his 4 insect-like legs. His mouth parts clicked together in what passed for a smile among his kind. Human feelings are noted, he said. But feelings do not change law. Perhaps if your species did not breed so quickly, you would not need so many worlds. Laughter spread through the chamber. Not from everyone, but from enough. The Rithani laughed. The Asari laughed. Even species that Catherine had thought were friendly to humanity made sounds of amusement. She looked around at the vast chamber. 400 species. Thousands of years of civilization. And they were laughing at the idea that human children might want to keep their homes. Daniel Pierce, her assistant, touched her arm. He was a young man, still believing that the system could work if they just tried hard enough. We should ask for more time, he whispered. File an appeal. There will be no appeal, Drethon announced, as if he had heard. This matter is closed. Humanity will obey or face punishment under the compliance protocols. Something changed in Catherine at that moment. She had spent decades bowing and scraping and apologizing for humanity's existence. She had smiled at insults and pretended not to notice when other species treated humans like clever animals. She had done everything right, and it had brought her here. To a room full of creatures laughing at human children being forced from their homes. I wish to make a final statement, she said. Drethon's scales flickered with annoyance. The matter is closed. I claim the right of final statement under the founding charter. Silence fell over the chamber. The right of final statement was ancient, almost forgotten. It came from a time when the council was smaller and species still had pride. Drethon paused for a long moment. Then he nodded. You have 3 minutes. Catherine walked to the very edge of her platform. She looked out at the assembly, at all those alien faces watching her with boredom or contempt or simple curiosity. 37 years ago, humanity came to this council with hope. We had just learned that we were not alone in the universe. We thought we had found a family. We thought we had found friends. She paused, letting her words echo in the silence. We accepted your laws, even when they seemed unfair. We paid your fees, even when they were higher than what other species paid. We smiled at your jokes about how fast we breed, how loud we are, how we smell wrong and think wrong and feel wrong. We did everything you asked because we wanted to belong. Kethrel clicked his mouth parts impatiently. Is there a point to this speech? The point. Catherine said, her voice suddenly cold, "is that I have spent 37 years watching how this council truly works. I have seen 412 rules applied to humanity, 412 restrictions on where we can go, what we can build, who we can trade with. In that same time, the Veth have faced 3 such rules. The Rahani have faced 7. The great and ancient species of this council live by different laws than the young and weak." The laughter had stopped. The chamber was very quiet now. "We tried to earn our place here," Catherine continued. "But I understand now that our place was never meant to be earned. It was meant to be kept small, controlled, managed. You do not see us as partners. You see us as pests who must be contained before we spread too far." Drethon's scales had shifted to deep red, the color of anger. "You are close to contempt of this council, Ambassador? Then let me remove all doubt." Catherine straightened her shoulders. "Humanity will not abandon Kepler-4 for to be. Not now, not ever. Our people will stay in their homes, and anyone who tries to remove them will learn what a mistake that is." Gasps filled the chamber. No one spoke to the council this way. No one had spoken this way in thousands of years. "If you defy this ruling," Drethon said slowly, "humanity will face the full consequences. Economic isolation, trade embargoes, military action, if necessary." Catherine turned to her delegation. All 12 humans rose as one, gathering their things with calm efficiency. "Then let the consequences come," she said. "We are leaving. If you walk out that door," Drethon called after her, "you will be declaring humanity an enemy of galactic civilization." Catherine paused at the exit. She turned back one final time and looked at the High Counselor, at the representatives of 400 species, at 12,000 years of history that had just decided human children did not matter. "We came to you as friends," she said. "We begged for the chance to be part of something greater, but you never wanted partners. You wanted servants?" She smiled, and there was no warmth in it at all. "Humanity does not serve." She walked out. Her delegation followed. The doors closed behind them with a soft sound that somehow echoed through the entire chamber. For a moment no one moved. Then chaos erupted. Species shouted at each other, demanding action, demanding calm, demanding explanations for what had just happened. High Counselor Drethon watched the closed doors and felt, for the first time in his long life, a small seed of worry take root in his mind. He told himself it was nothing. Humanity was young and foolish. They would learn their place, as all young species learn their place. He had no way of knowing that the galaxy was about to change forever. 3 weeks after the walkout, the galaxy began to realize that something was very wrong. Vice Admiral Samuel Grant stood in the observation room of Titan Station, watching through thick glass as thousands of workers and robots built warships. The construction yard stretched for hundreds of kilometers, filled with the skeletons of vessels that would soon carry weapons capable of destroying cities. "Commander," Lisa Vance walked up beside him. She was his second-in-command, a woman in her 40s, with short dark hair and eyes that missed nothing. "The latest numbers came in," she said. 14 carriers, 32 heavy cruisers, 96 destroyers. And that is just this station. Grant nodded slowly. He was a man of 60 years, with a face lined by decades of hard decisions. His hands had once worked on ship engines before they had ever signed orders for battle. "Luna Station is building faster," he said. "Mars is ahead of schedule. The colonies at Bernard Star just finished their first carrier last week." Lisa looked out at the massive construction effort. The Council must be watching this. They have spy satellites everywhere. They are watching. But watching is not the same as understanding. "What do you mean?" Grant turned to face her. "For 37 years, we built what they expected us to build. Slow transport ships. Trading vessels. A small defense fleet, just enough to not seem completely helpless. We were the good children, doing exactly what the grown-ups told us to do." He walked to a screen on the wall and pressed some buttons. A map of the galaxy appeared, with human space marked in blue. It was a small area compared to the vast territories of older species. But we also did things they did not see. He pressed another button. And green dots appeared all over the map, scattered in places far from human space. Secret shipyards and systems we never officially claimed. Mining operations on asteroids that are not in any registry. Research stations hidden in the shadows of dying stars. Lisa stared at the map. There were hundreds of green dots. How long have we been preparing for this? Since the day we joined the council? Grant's face showed no emotion. We watched what happened to the Keth when the Veth decided they wanted Keth's territory. We saw the Palari lose half their worlds to a trick of law. We learned very quickly how this galaxy really works. The strong take what they want, and the weak smile. And say thank you. So we prepared. Not because we wanted war, but because we knew that someday someone would decide that humanity had something worth taking. And on that day, we wanted to be ready. Outside the window, another ship frame was taking shape. Workers moved across it like ants on a fallen tree, welding and cutting and building. The council thinks we are children throwing a tantrum, Grant said. They think we will get scared and come running back, begging for forgiveness. They do not understand us at all. 2 days later, a Rithani trade convoy learned exactly how much they had misunderstood. The convoy was made up of 18 large cargo ships, carrying goods between Rithani worlds. They traveled on a route they had used hundreds of times before. Passing through space that was supposed to be empty and safe, the human frigate appeared out of nowhere. It had been hiding behind a small moon, running silent, waiting. Rithani convoy, came a human voice over the radio. You are entering restricted space. Change your course immediately. The convoy commander, a Rethani named Voshin, checked his navigation charts in confusion. Human vessel, this is a registered trade route. Your space is marked as being 3 light years in a different direction. Our borders changed 3 days ago. You are now in human territory. You have 10 minutes to turn around. That is impossible. You cannot change your borders without council permission. There was a pause. Then a woman's voice came over the radio, calm and almost amused. Council permission is no longer something we care about. Turn around, or be treated as hostile. 9 minutes. Voshan looked at his sensors. The human ship was small, but its weapons were powered up and pointed directly at his convoy. This is madness, he said. The economic damage to your species will be enormous if you do this. The Rithani Collective voted for sanctions against humanity yesterday. We are simply returning the favor. 8 minutes. The convoy turned around. Within 1 week, similar incidents happened 14 times across the galaxy. Human ships appeared at important locations, at busy trade routes, at narrow passages between star systems. They enforced borders that the Council had never approved, turning back ships from species that had laughed at them in the Grand Assembly. When the Veth Dominion sent a patrol fleet to push back, they found 50 human warships waiting for them. The Veth commander took one look at the enemy formation and decided his ships were needed elsewhere. On Verith Prime, High Counselor Drethon called an emergency meeting. This is war, declared Ambassador Cathrell, his mouth parts clicking frantically. Humanity is attacking our trade, our economy, our way of life. They are attacking Veth and Rathani trade, corrected the Asari delegate, sounding almost pleased. My people's ships pass through without trouble. For now, Cathrell snapped. Do you think they will stop with us? Drethon raised a limb to call for silence. We must respond with strength. I propose we increase economic sanctions immediately. Sanctions are already in place, someone pointed out. The humans do not seem to care. Then we move to military force. The compact allows us to take action together against any species that threatens galactic peace. The chamber buzzed with nervous agreement. It had been centuries since the Council had voted for war against one of its members. But the humans were clearly out of control. How many ships do the humans have? Asked the delegate from the temporal sovereignty. A species known for being careful. Drethon asked his advisors. We believe approximately 300 combat vessels in our combined fleets. Over 12,000, the delegate nodded. Then the numbers are clear. If we work together, humanity cannot win. The vote was held. 312 species voted yes for military action. Ada4 did not vote at all. For voted no. As the meeting ended, Drethon felt satisfied. The humans had made a terrible mistake. They would be crushed, and then they would learn whatever young species eventually learned. The galaxy belonged to those who had been here first. He did not notice the tiny human observation drone, no bigger than a grain of sand, floating in the air near the ceiling. It recorded every word, every vote, every face. Then it sent all that information to a ship waiting in space beyond the planet. The message reached Earth 3 hours later. Admiral Grant read it and nodded. "They voted for war," Lisa said. "All of them together. Almost all of them." Grant stood and looked out the window at the stars. "Now they will learn why that was a mistake. Tell all commands to move to final positions. The trap is ready. All we need to do is wait for them to walk into it." The largest war in 4,000 years was about to begin. The Allied fleet gathered at the edge of human space 3 months later. It was the largest military force anyone had seen in 4,000 years. Over 8,000 warships from 47 different species filled the darkness of space, their engines burning like angry stars. Admiral Thessalar commanded the fleet from his flagship, a massive vessel called the Endless Triumph. He was old for his species, his shell scarred from battles fought before humanity had even discovered fire. The council had chosen him because he had never lost a war, report he ordered from his command chair, his tactical officer. A younger Veth, named Keshrin, studied her screens. "All ships are in position, Admiral. We have located the human defense fleet. They have approximately 400 vessels." The Solaris mouthparts clicked with surprise. 400. Our report said 300. They appear to have built more ships faster than we expected. It does not matter. We outnumber them 20 to 1. Signal all fleet commanders. We advance in 6 hours. The Armada moved forward in a formation that had crushed rebellions for thousands of years. The biggest ships stayed in the center, protected by rings of smaller vessels. Fighters and bombers waited inside carriers. Ready to swarm out at a moment's notice, the human fleet waited for them at a system. It's called Tau Ceti. It was one of humanity's oldest colony worlds, home to 3 million people who had refused to leave even when the war was announced. Admiral Grant watched the approaching enemy from the bridge of his carrier Endeavor. His fleet was arranged in a defensive circle around the 4th planet, where human cities glowed with light on the dark side. "They are not even trying to hide their numbers," Lisa observed. "They want us to see how many there are. Of course they do. They think this is already over." Grant studied the tactical display, which showed thousands of red dots closing in on a small cluster of blue ones. Thessalar is commanding. He is a good admiral, smart and careful. He will not take any stupid risks. Does that help us? It means he will do exactly what we expect him to do. The enemy fleet entered the system and began its approach. When they were close enough for real-time communication, Thessalar opened a channel. "Human fleet, this is Admiral Thessalar, representing the Galactic Council. You are ordered to surrender immediately. Your species has been found guilty of crimes against galactic peace. If you give up now, the Council will be merciful."
Oh.
Grant leaned back in his chair. His face was calm, almost bored. "Admiral Thessalar, this is Admiral Samuel Grant of the United Nations Space Command. I have a different suggestion. Turn your fleet around and go home. No one has to die today." There was a long silence. "Cannot be serious. You are outnumbered beyond any hope of victory. Your resistance will only cause pointless death." "Maybe, but it will be our death, on our terms, in our own space. And I promise you, Admiral, we will not die cheap." The Solar ended the transmission. 30 minutes later, his fleet began its final attack run. What happened next would be studied and argued about for centuries. The human fleet did not wait to be surrounded. As the Allied Armada advanced, Grant's ships suddenly accelerated forward, splitting into 6 separate groups that dove directly into gaps between enemy squadrons. Thessalar had expected the humans to hide behind their planet, using its gravity for protection. He had expected them to fight defensively, to make him dig them out. Instead, they attacked. The first exchange of weapons fire was terrible for both sides. Human railguns, which fired solid metal at incredible speeds, punched through shields that had been designed to stop energy beams. Human missiles were smart, slipping past defenses and exploding inside ships instead of against their hulls. Human point defense systems worked together in ways that enemy targeting computers could not predict, creating zones of death that shredded incoming fire, but they were still outnumbered 20-1. Human ships died. The carrier Valiant was cut in half by concentrated fire from a Rathani battle group. The cruiser Houston took a direct hit to her power core and simply stopped existing. Grant watched his people die around him and kept giving orders. Wolfpack 7 hit the flagship's escorts. Sierra Group, break through that Asari formation. All carriers, launch every fighter we have. The battle became chaos. The neat enemy formations fell apart as human ships wove between them, too close for big weapons to be aimed properly. It became a knife fight in a crowded room. The humans had been training for knife fights their whole lives. 3 hours into the battle, Admiral Thessalar received a report that made his scales turn pale. "We have lost over 900 ships," Keshrin told him, her voice shaking. "The humans have lost 112. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "Their ships are faster than we thought. More nimble. Their weapons cut through our armor like it is paper, and every time we change our tactics, they change theirs faster." On the Endeavor, Grant received a message that made him smile for the first time in hours. "Admiral, the Rathani ships are running." He looked at the tactical display. It was true. Nearly 1,000 Rathani vessels were breaking away from the battle, fleeing toward the edge of the system as fast as they could go. "They've had enough." Grant turned to Lisa. "Tell all ships to focus fire on the Veth Center, break their line, and everyone else will run too." The next hour was the bloodiest of the entire battle. Human ships died in greater numbers as they concentrated their attack on the Vethkor fleet. But the Veth died faster. A railgun round punched through the bridge of the Endless Triumph, and Admiral Thessalar became just another casualty command passed to Keshrin. She looked at her screens, at the numbers that only showed disaster, and made the only decision she could.
Ow!
Veth ships. Retreat. The Allied fleet shattered. Species that had fought side by side for thousands of years turned and ran, each trying to escape before the humans could catch them. Human ships chased them to the edge of the system, destroying stragglers until Grant finally called them back. "We have proven our point." The Battle of Tau Ceti was over. The Allied fleet had lost over 2,000 ships. The humans had lost 160-8. Grant stood on his damaged bridge, looking at the field of wreckage that spread across millions of kilometers. Pieces of ships tumbled through the void. Bodies floated in the darkness. The largest fleet in 4,000 years had been broken in a single day. "Get me a communication channel to Earth," he said quietly, and then to the Council. "I think it is time we talked again." Lisa looked at him. "What are you going to say?" Grant watched a piece of debris drift past the window, still glowing from whatever fire had destroyed it. "I am going to offer them peace," he said, "and then we will see if they are smart enough to take it." The Grand Assembly was half empty when Ambassador Catherine Holt returned. She walked through the same crystal corridors she had walked 3 months before. She passed the same ancient pillars, entered the same vast chamber. But everything felt different now. The platforms where the Rathani once sat were empty. The Veth delegation was gone. A dozen other species had recalled their representatives after the disaster at Tau Ceti. "Hi." Counselor Drethon waited at the central pillar. His scales were dim, and he moved slowly like a creature that had not slept in a very long time. "Ambassador Holt," he said as she took her position. "You requested this meeting." "I did." Catherine looked around at the remaining representatives. She could see fear in their eyes, in the way they held their bodies, in the way they would not look directly at her. "I wanted to speak to the Council one final time. Council recognizes humanity's victory at Tau Ceti. We are ready to discuss new terms for your continued membership." "No." The single word hung in the air like smoke. "I am sorry. We are not here to discuss membership." Catherine's voice was calm and clear. Humanity is leaving the Galactic Compact, effective immediately. We no longer wish to be part of this organization. Sounds of shock rippled through the chamber. Some species made clicking noises. Others hummed low tones of distress. Ambassador, surely we can reach some agreement. The Council has always been willing to talk with reasonable species. We can offer territory, resources, whatever you require. Catherine laughed. It was not a friendly sound. Reasonable species. That is what you call it. She stepped forward, and something in the way she moved made even the oldest delegates lean back in their seats. Let me tell you what humanity calls it. For 37 years, you treated us like misbehaving children. You took what we produced, limited where we could go, and told us it was for our own good. When we asked for fair treatment, you laughed. When we demanded justice, you sent a fleet to destroy us. She pressed a button on her wrist, and images appeared floating above her platform. Burning ships, bodies floating in space. The wreckage of the Allied fleet scattered across a star system. 2,000 ships. Hundreds of thousands of lives lost. All because we refused to abandon 12,000 colonists. Her voice grew harder. You did this. Every species that voted for military action. Every delegate who sat silent while others mocked us. Every council member who thought humans could be pushed around forever. Drethon's scales flickered in patterns that meant distress. The Council accepts that mistakes were made. We can offer payments to the families of those who died. We can give territory. We can change the laws that treated humanity unfairly. You still do not understand. Catherine's smile was cold. We do not want your membership. We do not want your treaties or your approval or your territory. We wanted to be your friends. We wanted to be part of something bigger than ourselves. And you chose to make us enemies. Now you will live with what that means. What does that mean? The human fleet is currently positioned at 14 strategic locations throughout the galaxy. We control the main trade routes between the 4 largest economies. We have built military bases in systems your maps say are empty, but which we have been using for decades. And our shipyards are producing new warships faster than your spies can count them. The chamber had gone completely silent. Even the automatic translation systems seemed to hold their breath. We are not going to conquer you, Catherine continued. We are not going to destroy your worlds or enslave your people. We are simply going to live on our own terms, make our own rules, and answer to no one but ourselves. And if anyone decides to try again to put humanity back in its place, they will discover what we are truly capable of when we stop trying to make friends. She turned to leave, then stopped. The Kepler 442b colony will remain exactly where it is. The Veth claim is rejected now and forever. If anyone has a problem with that, I suggest they remember what happened to the last fleet that tried to enforce a council ruling against us. Catherine Holt walked out of the Grand Assembly for the second time in her life. No one tried to stop her. No one said a word in the weeks that followed. Galactic order that had existed for 12,000 years began to fall apart. Species that had depended on the Council for protection found themselves alone. Trade networks that had operated on the assumption of peace broke into smaller regional agreements. Old alliances crumbled. New ones formed, and throughout it all, humanity built. They built ships. They built stations. They built colonies on worlds that the Council had once forbidden them to touch. They traded with species willing to treat them as equals and ignored those who were not. They explored regions of space that older species had long ago decided were too dangerous or too far away. On Earth, people debated what humanity should become. Some wanted revenge, wanted to punish the species that had voted for war. Others wanted isolation, wanted to build walls around human space and never speak to aliens again. But most wanted something in between. They wanted to show the galaxy that humanity was not what others had claimed. Not pests. Not animals. Not a disease to be controlled. They were something new. Something the galaxy had never seen before. News spread across 1,000 worlds. The humans had not just survived. They had not just won. They were changing everything. Some species saw this as a disaster. The old order was dying, and they did not know what would take its place, but others, especially the young species, the weak species, the ones who had spent centuries being pushed around by their betters, looked at humanity and felt something they had almost forgotten. Hope. If the humans could stand up to the entire galaxy and win, then maybe the rules were not as fixed as everyone thought. Maybe things could change. Maybe the strong did not always have to win. Maybe being new and small did not mean being powerless forever. On Vareth Prime, High Counselor Drethon sat alone in his chambers, watching reports come in from across the galaxy. Trade disruptions, border disputes, species withdrawing from the compact. Everything he had worked to build for centuries was crumbling. He had made a terrible mistake. They all had. They had looked at humanity and seen what they expected to see. A young species, weak, controllable, easy to frighten. They had not understood. Till it was too late. Humans were not like other species. They did not think in terms of centuries. They did not accept their place in an order decided before they were born. They looked at the universe and saw not what was, but what could be, and they were willing to burn everything to the ground to make it happen. Drethon turned off his screens and sat in the darkness for a long time. The galaxy was changing, whether he wanted it to or not. The only question now was what would rise from the ashes. He had a feeling he would not like the answer. 5 years had passed since the Battle of Tau Ceti. 5 years since humanity had walked out of the Grand Assembly. 5 years since the old order had begun to crumble. A small ship arrived at Vareth Prime on a quiet morning. It carried weapons and broadcast codes that identified it as a diplomatic vessel. When it landed at the ancient spaceport near the Grand Assembly, only a small group waited to meet it. Ambassador Catherine Holt stepped off the ship and breathed air. It smelled of flowers she could not name. She was older now, past 60, with more gray in her hair and more lines on her face. But her eyes were the same. Sharp, watchful, full of a fire that had never died. Hi. Counselor Drethon waited for her at the end of the landing pad. He, too, had aged. His scales were duller than she remembered, and he moved with the careful slowness of someone whose body was beginning to fail. Ambassador Holt, he said. It has been a long time. It has. She fell into step beside him as they walked toward the crystal towers. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me. I must admit I was surprised by your request. After everything that happened, I did not expect humanity to want anything to do with the Council. Times change. People change. Catherine looked up at the spires that reached toward the clouds. Even institutions as old as this one. They walked in silence for a while. Past gardens filled with plants from 100 worlds. Past statues of leaders long dead. Past the ghosts of 12,000 years of history. Your message said you wished to discuss a new relationship, Drethon said finally. I did. But first, I wanted to understand something. Catherine stopped at a window that looked out over the city below. A place of towers and bridges and lights that had existed since before humanity discovered how to make fire. Why did you do it? The sanctions, the military action, all of it. You must have known we would fight. Drethon was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was tired. Fear, he said. Your species frightened us. You grew so fast. You changed so quickly. In 12,000 years we had never seen anything like it. We thought if we could slow you down, keep you contained, we could protect the stability we had built. Instead, you created exactly what you were afraid of. Yes, he turned to face her. I have had 5 years to think about our mistakes. The Council was built to manage species that think the way we do. Species that move slowly, plan carefully, accept their place in the natural order. Humanity is different. You do not wait for permission. You do not accept limits. You simply do what you believe needs to be done, and then deal with whatever comes next. Catherine smiled slightly. It has gotten us into trouble before. And yet here you are, standing strong. While the Council that tried to destroy you falls apart, Drethon's scales shifted to colors that might have meant respect. So tell me, Ambassador, what do you want? The same thing I wanted 5 years ago. Partnership, cooperation, a place in the galactic community. where we can work together with other species as equals. She held up a hand as he started to speak. Not as members of this council. That system has had its time. But we are building something new. A network of species that want to work together without the old rules, without the ancient rankings, without the idea that some species are naturally better than others, and you are inviting the council species to join? I am inviting any species that wants to move forward. The ones who understand that the galaxy is changing and that holding on to the past will not stop it. Drethon looked out the window at his city, at the world that had been the center of galactic civilization for longer than many stars had burned. There are many who would fight against this, he said slowly. The Veth, the Rathani, others who lost much in the war. They will not forgive easily. They are welcome to stay in the past. But in another generation, their children will ask why their parents chose to be alone instead of being part of something greater. Catherine turned from the window. That is the thing about humanity, counselor. We do not think about what has always been. We think about what could be. And what could be is a galaxy where every species has a voice, where disagreements are solved through talking instead of fighting, and where no one has to pretend to be less than they are just to avoid making someone else uncomfortable. She extended her hand, palm up, in the human gesture of greeting and peace. Are you ready to try something new? Drethon looked at her hand. He thought about everything that had happened. The war, the defeat, the long years of watching the old order fall apart piece by piece. He thought about his people, who had ruled this region of space for so long, and were now just one species among many. And then he thought about the future, about the young members of his species who looked at the humans with curiosity instead of fear, about the new trade routes that were opening, the new technologies being shared, the new ideas spreading from world to world. The galaxy was changing. He could fight against it and lose everything. Or he could accept it and help shape what came next. Slowly, he extended one of his limbs and touched his appendage to her palm. I believe, he said, that the galaxy is ready for something new. Far away, on the observation deck of his flagship, Admiral Samuel Grant watched a live feed of the meeting. His hair was completely gray now, and he walked with a slight limp from an old injury that had never quite healed. But his mind was as sharp as ever. Commander Lisa Vance stood beside him, also older, also marked by the years of building and fighting and hoping. Do you think it will work? She asked. This alliance they are creating. Grant was silent for a moment, watching as Catherine Holt and the High Counselor walked together through the ancient halls, talking about the future. Probably not in the way anyone imagines. Things never turn out exactly how we plan. Then why do it? He smiled, the same quiet smile he had worn through the darkest days of the war and the brightest days of victory. Standing still was never an option. Because the galaxy needed to change, and someone had to push it. And because humanity has never been able to look at the stars without wondering what else is out there. He turned to face her. We did not fight that war to destroy the Council or to rule the galaxy. We fought it so we could be free to become whatever we wanted to become. This alliance, this new order they are building, it is just the next step. And what comes after that? I have no idea. And that is the best part. Grant looked out at the stars that filled the viewing window, countless points of light stretching into forever. Every species in this galaxy knows exactly what they are and what they will always be. They have known for thousands of years, but humanity is still figuring it out. We are still becoming something. And as long as we keep becoming, keep growing, keep reaching for things we do not yet understand, we will always have something to live for. Lisa followed his gaze out into the darkness, at the stars that humans had once only dreamed of touching. Do you think they will ever stop being afraid of us? She asked. Grant thought about the question for a long time. Oh, he said finally, but I think someday they might stop being afraid and start being inspired instead. They might look at us and think, if the humans can do it, maybe we can too. Maybe we do not have to accept the way things have always been. Maybe change is possible. He put his hand on the cold glass of the window. That is what we really gave the galaxy. Not victory, not power, not fear. We gave them an example. We showed them that the future does not have to look like the past. And once that idea takes root, once beings start to believe that things can be different, nothing will ever be the same. Outside, the stars burned on as they had for billions of years. But among them, something new was growing. Ships from dozens of species moved on missions of trade and exploration and hope. Messages of friendship crossed the void between worlds that had once been enemies. And slowly, carefully, like a flower opening after a long winter, the galaxy began to change. The old order was gone. Something new was being born. And at the heart of it all, humanity continued to do what it had always done. They reached for the stars. They dreamed of tomorrow. And they never, ever stopped moving forward. The galaxy would never be the same. And that was exactly how it should be.